All right, we're back with another Auburn Live football show. Appreciate everybody for joining us. I'm Justin Hokanson. With me, as always, is Cole Pinkston. Cole, what's up, man? How are you?
I am good. How about yourself, man? I enjoyed some football over the weekend. I think I watched every single play of every game that was televised, and
Did you?
it was awesome.
I I'll be honest. I love college football. I'm not the guy that's going to watch every game, every play. I
I'm
just
not.
not.
As we get into the season, I won't do that. But right now, I'm looking for anything I can, and
Yeah, I mean, I
I was
watched.
all over it.
I tried to watch some, Navy Notre Dame, but that was just a complete joke. And
Yeah,
so I was like, okay. Um, and then I just had other stuff going on. Didn't get to watch some of the other games, but yeah, I mean, I was watching. I don't know. It was good to have it back. That was pretty cool to watch game day. Watch game day in the morning,
yeah.
um, and I don't know. Like Desmond Howard is just he's got to have stock. He's got to have like investments, like in Texas. Like if Texas A&M makes the playoff, there's got to be a payoff for him or something. Something's going on with Desmond Howard. Last year Desmond Howard infamously picks Texas A&M to win the national championship last year. And that was just obviously turned out to be a joke. This year, he picks A&M as his dark horse in the SEC, which is not as far fetched as last year. But then he turns around and he also picks them to make the playoff again. I'm like, man, this guy is just going to ride this until he's right, I guess.
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better about some of the RPM predictions that I missed this year because I think I was a lot closer than he was.
Yeah, yeah. You can't get worse than picking A&M to win the national championship last year. I mean, that was pretty it's pretty awful, but it's fun to watch college game day.
Definitely.
They talked about the SEC. They had A&M. See who they picked. They said A&M. One of them said Kentucky was a dark horse. One of them said Tennessee was the dark horse, which Tennessee's ranked 12th. But I get it. That's probably their fourth. That's like fourth in the SEC.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody, no Auburn talk. No surprise. No surprise there. No real talk or intrigue around Auburn. They'll have to earn it.
I think that's for the best right now. Just be somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle. They're not thinking about you either way, right?
Yeah. This team doesn't need any accolades. They don't need any of that. Hey, before we get going, real quick, shout out to our partner and sponsor, Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. Go check them out. They're right there on Magnolia Avenue, just to the right of Taco Mama. Great environment. Had some drinks there on Saturday night.
Awesome.
It was hopping. It was a good spot. They got bar seating, they got couch seating, they got booths, they got some tabletops. Nothing, no stand seating. It's not a college bar like that. You got to have a place to sit. They make awesome cocktails. Go check them out. Hunter and Avery and Joe and all the great people at Session Cocktail. Happy hour 4 to 6. If you want to start trying to hit them up for happy hour, they do a great job there. I'm sure it's going to be really crowded on Saturday for game day. It'd be a great place to pop in and out for a drink if you're downtown tailgating or something like that, or just walking around buying T-shirts and all that good stuff like people do. So go check them out. Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. All right, Colts game week, dude. Can you believe it?
No, it was a slow crawl, man. That was Jeffrey and I have talked about this. That was the longest recruiting season. And of course, I'm new to this, but even he agreed, like, as long as he's been doing it, this was the longest recruiting season ever, off season in general. I don't know why it was, but it is. Maybe when there's more excitement around the program, it seems to take longer. It's kind of like Christmas morning, right?
Yeah, maybe. I think for you guys, well, it depends on what makes it longer. I mean, with the portal, there's certainly more to do. The portal extends that spring period. It's like May
Yeah.
and you're still tracking stuff. And the portal just, it really extends the after spring ball, you're still tracking, in essence, recruiting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they have all the events and high scoring stuff. I think that portal to me extended sort of the busy season for us by like another month after the spring. And so really it's like, of course, for me, it's June and July are kind of my slow months. And then I'm, basketball, football, all that stuff. Recruiting, of course, is going on in June and July and then slows down a little bit when camp gets going. But I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I guess it feels like, I don't know if it's going slow or fast, really. I mean, since Freeze was hired in November, you think about spring camp, feels like it's gone by kind of quickly to me, but but we're here. And I don't know, it always sort of sneaks up on you, I guess, in a way too. And so I don't know what that says. It's always like you think about how long, think about that last game, and you're like, you have X number of months till you get there. And then when you get here, you're like, what have I been doing the last 8 months? I don't know, or, whatever. It's just like
Yeah, right.
you forget like kind of everything that happened because you're back in the season. But yeah, I think it's exciting, man. I mean, we should have a great crowd Saturday, right? Should be the biggest largest capacity crowd in the history of the stadium officially. 88,043 is the new capacity for the stadium with some of the premium seating additions. And so while they may have crammed more people in there at times, this will be officially the largest sellout in the history of the program. It's always been 87,451.
How many
Now,
people do you think Auburn gets in the stadium when everybody, let's just say it's the Iron Bowl, and everybody's standing on the rails? You got all that. How many do you think it officially gets to?
oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, because you got tickets sold, butts in seats, right? But then you've got, I think where it really balloons is you've got, visiting passes on the sideline and
Yeah.
people in the box, maybe some extra people in the box or something. And there's stuff like that it can balloon up to. I'm not sure they can ever sell more tickets than butts and seats, like the numbers
Yeah, right.
on seats, but yeah, it balloons up when you start talking visitors and visitor passes and on the sideline. That probably makes a difference. But I don't know, man. Yeah, some games in the past, you look up and you're like, the stadium looks full, and then I'm seeing thousands of people on the
On the ramps.
ramp smoking, which is what years
Yeah.
ago. That's the deal. People would go there. Some people went because they could have a better view. A lot of people went there because they could smoke, and but they just stayed there. But a lot of people throughout the years, people love to just stand there because it was a better view, especially if you're in the upper deck. You go down and they thought that was a better view standing there than being in the upper deck in that spot, which I can kind of get too.
I know one time when I was younger, I went to an Iron Bowl and didn't have a ticket, was tailgating right outside the stadium, and ended up, they were just letting people in to go stand on the ramps. So I think they will do that if it's a big game. They want to pack people in.
Yeah, I've normally just been in there. I guess I've never been out there like second quarter and seen people just rolling in. What was your first Iron Bowl?
Oh man, it was I believe it was the game that Brody Crowell got sacked 12 times.
Oh yeah.
I also
Oh,
went to
God.
an Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa before that, but that was the first one in Jordan-Hare Stadium, I believe.
Yeah,
That was a fun
2000.
one, man. That was a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama was really good that year as a top 10. I mean, I think Auburn, I don't know where Auburn, they're both right around top 10, and Auburn jumped all over them in the first quarter and then kind of cruised the rest of the way. Didn't need to do a whole lot, held them down. And but yeah, the first quarter, they jumped all over Alabama in that game. And then, yeah, I think they sacked Brody Crowell 11 times in that game. That Auburn team was really, really damn good. They screwed up in the bowl game because they didn't go down there and take things seriously. And that 05 team should have beaten LSU in Baton Rouge. John Vaughn missed 3 or 4 field goals. They barely lose the game in Baton Rouge. They messed up the game at the beginning of the year against Georgia Tech in Jordan-Hare, where Brandon Cox it was his first start and threw for a lot of yards, but threw a bunch of picks. And Reggie Ball and them came in. I think Reggie was still there, and Georgia Tech upset Auburn right off the bat. Pretty disappointing game. And then that was it. I mean, that team got it together, goes to Athens, beats Georgia, then comes and plays a top 10 Alabama, whips them. And I mean, at that point, Auburn was, they were one of the best teams in the country. And then they went down there and messed around and didn't take the bowl game seriously. And Wisconsin Wisconsin ran all over them. And I can't remember that running back. I can picture the running back. He was number 2. I think it might have been Barry Alvarez's last game, 05.
Yeah.
But I can't remember. They had a running back that played the NFL. Like, he was dynamic, and they just ran roughshod. And I heard stories later on, like Auburn, the players messed around before, like that week. They didn't take things seriously, and they got smoked in a bowl game. That should have been a 10-win Auburn team, which would have been back-to-back 10 wins, 04, 05. And now, because they messed that up, that's something that hasn't happened ever. I mean, I don't have to go back and look. I mean, it's something that just rarely, if ever, happens for Auburn. It's back-to-back 10-win seasons.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, all right, let's talk about this game and anything else we want to talk about. UMass. Did you watch any of the UMass games? So UMass played New Mexico State, won 41-30. UMass did, which is funny. Auburn plays New Mexico State later in the year too. UMass is the first opponent. UMass wins 41-30. New Mexico State, if you look at the stats, New Mexico State had more first downs, more total yards, more passing yards, more rushing yards, less penalties. I mean, the turnovers. New Mexico State turned the ball over 3 times. Brian Calhoun, yeah, thank you, Zach. That's exactly who it was. Number 2.
Yes.
He was a stud.
Yeah.
New Mexico State time of possession. I mean, New Mexico State had the upper hand in nearly everything except turnovers. UMass had a pick 6 on defense, and those turnovers killed them. And UMass wins the game 41-30. Auburn's 38-point favorites. They're going to out-athlete New Mexico State regardless of where Auburn's at. They're going to out-athlete them, and so I don't know what's sort of on your mind as game week gets going here. We'll talk to Hugh Freeze on Monday and get rolling. What's kind of on your mind heading into this week? It seems like very much a week and a game about Auburn and trying to get off to a good start in the Freeze era, trying to get Peyton Thorne off to a good start versus worrying about UMass too much and trying to come out there and throw something on the table that you feel good about going to Cal the next week.
Yeah. I think because number one, with UMass, I didn't watch the entire game, but I watched a good portion of it before Vandy and Hawaii started. And the quarterback, I think he's worth mentioning, Tyson. I can't even begin to tell you how to pronounce that last name.
No, go for it.
Tyson P. How about that? If you've seen that name, it's probably because he was at Clemson. He was a 4-star recruit, a guy that Dabo Swinney liked a lot. Got it. Clemson, he never really played and transferred to UMass. And obviously he's pretty sporty. I didn't see the full game of his, but had some good plays and can make plays with his legs. So, he's interesting. There's no doubt. But the thing about this game in UMass, I think the biggest thing is having California the next week. And that game can get a little hairy. That's the thing about it. Just because it's new territory, it's a weird time. You're going to be in a weird place. I don't know if I actually did an interview last week with a guy that covers Cal, and we sort of previewed the game. And he was telling me that the California attendance has been one of the worst in the country in college football in the last 5 years. The home game attendances. I don't know. I haven't watched the California game, so I really couldn't tell you. But he said there's probably going to be more Auburn fans there. I thought that was really interesting. But the reason I think UMass is all that more interesting is, number one, it's the first game and there's so many new faces. But number two, it's because you have to – it's not a game where you can get up big and then pull your starters immediately. I think you got to let them play a little bit. And it's sort of a risk thing there. If you get somebody hurt, but you can't just pull them after a quarter if you're up 21-0 or 28-0 in the first half.
No,
you got to play them. You got to get them some game time. This is the first game, and you got a pretty decent sized game coming up next week. So,
yeah,
there's going to be some coaching decisions that are going to have to be made there, and I'm interested to see that. I want to see how this coaching staff goes about that. Obviously, I want to see Peyton Thorne in action. I want to see Damari Alston. He's one of the top 3 or 5 guys that is very intriguing to me, and I think could have a huge breakout season.
Yeah. I think you're right about – by the way, I was looking up the UMass's quarterback. He's from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Makes sense that he kind of went back closer to home. But, yeah, he accounted for 192 passing yards. He didn't throw a touchdown or a pick, but accounted for 192 passing yards, but then he had 96 rushing yards and a touchdown. He's 6'4", 215, so he's an athlete. Now, you're not going to come to Jordan-Hare and I mean, just out-athlete. Like, he's not going to just be like, I'm an athlete. He'll make some plays, and it'll be a good, he's clearly mobile, and it'll be a good little test for Auburn in terms of rushing the quarterback. He'll probably won't be the easiest guy to get down. But he's clearly their offense. I mean, it's just going to be whatever he wants to do. You mentioned a good point about about playing all these guys, I think it's a no-brainer. Like you're going to have to play them extended time. They need work.
Yep.
I think this first game is it's almost to me it's a culture setting type game. If you're Hugh Freeze and it's game one of your era, game one, and it's against an opponent that you should out athlete and you should win, right? You're 38-point favorites.
Yeah.
This is the game where from the get-go you set your culture, what the expectation is pregame, during the game, whatever it is, like running, huddle, hustle, attitude. I think this is it. Like there's going to be a lot of hiccups in terms of, logistics and maybe getting guys on the field. There'll be a little, there'll probably be some mistakes and, just stuff like that happens. It won't be clean. But from a culture standpoint, it's such an opportunity. Like, hey, if nothing else, we're going to do those things right. Like, I want to see the kind of defense, like Ron Roberts. Hey, I want to see the kind of defense that we're going to deploy here at Auburn. I want to see it today. Like this is like from here, like every game when we step on the field, this is who we are. And I think as much as anything, this is that opportunity to do that before you go on the road and face Cal. I think it's a culture setting kind of game for freezing these guys.
Definitely. Yeah, it is. By the way, if you'd have told me that possibly the largest crowd in Jordan-Hare history would be for the University of Massachusetts game,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have believed you, but that is, I mean, it's possible. I think the crowd is going to be electric, and that's crazy. And Auburn might get up big and it might slow down a little bit, but that pregame and all that's going to be awesome. And I think, even when there wasn't energy around the program a year ago with Harsin and his staff in charge and everything that was going on there, was it last year when Tank Bixby had that run and he's like beating his chest as he's running into the end zone on that long run? I mean, they're going to be energized, and I love that. That's going to be a lot of fun. But, are they jittery? Is Peyton Thorne jittery? Is this something that he's going to be – is he going to be cool and calm like he's always looked every time you watch his film? Damari Alston, if he's getting a lot of the carries, is he going to be, ready to roll? Is his first time? That's the thing. There's so many guys that are wearing an Auburn uniform for the first time in this game. I mean, half the team, right?
Yeah.
At other places, but not at Auburn, not in that stadium. Sometimes that energy is. Sometimes that juice you get from the stadium being like that is almost it can be detrimental in a way. You can get overjuiced. It happens. So when that happens, that's what I want to see the staff. I want to observe Hugh Freeze on the sideline. That is something I loved doing with Brian Harsin when we sit up in the box and we get to see that. I like to observe his temperament. I like to see how he handles when guys make mistakes or if he sees somebody with making a mistake, whatever the case may be. I'm just interested in that. I like to see how they do those things because right now the picture in our mind of Hugh Freeze is that he's a happy-go-lucky guy, real nice to media, all that kind of stuff. He'll let you know if something, he doesn't love, but he's very nice, genuinely. So I'm just thinking, is he going to kind of look like a different person out there? Is he going to have a different demeanor with the team? It's not really a big game, honestly, but it is at the same time. And I think he's going to be kind of juiced up too.
Yeah, it'd be crazy. First game, I mean, I'm sure most of those guys are going to have some kind of jitters. First time out. I think you mentioned Damari Alston. I think he's going to have a ball game. That guy is so primed to break out that this first game, I just have a feeling he could have a monster game. Curious to see how Peyton Thorne plays, obviously, and see if he's too amped up, kind of decisions he makes. I'm sure Shane Hooks will make some plays and all that good stuff. I don't know what you'll be able to take from this. That's why I kind of go back to the culture side of it. I don't think you're going to be able to walk away from this game and say, well, Auburn's defensive line is for real or their offensive line is for real. I just don't think UMass has enough to be able to make that determination. I think you're going to have to look a little bit deeper, look for culture stuff, look for hustle plays, look specifically for the decisions Peyton Thorne's making. Maybe not, don't sit there and look at yards and touchdowns. Try to look at the decisions that he's making.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. He's making the right call, making the right decision. Missed tackles, look at missed tackles. We heard about missed tackles a little bit in one of the scrimmages. So let's see how they tackle and if they do well there. I'm also looking to kind of see who plays. I mean, that last week of fall camp, you had a lot of guys banged up, especially on defense. You had Jalen McLeod, Austin Keys, Keldrick Falk, Marcus Harris, I think, got banged up in the last scrimmage. You had a lot of guys there injured. Coyme had some guys at receiver that have been injured, lingering stuff for a while. Want to see maybe where's Javaris Johnson at, where's Malcolm Johnson Jr. at. But that defense, those Keys, McLeod, Falk, and I think that's it. But those three guys missed multiple practices, missed time that last week. I want to see if they're out there and they're good to go. Hopefully that was kind of lingering stuff that they kept them out that last week. They limited their reps. And it's nothing serious, I don't think. But want to make sure all those guys are out there. You want to watch the linebackers. You want to watch the kind of calls they're making sure guys are aligned right in that front seven, that the fits are right, that the linebackers are making the right calls. And there seems to be good communication in the front part of that defense with a brand new defense. It's going to do some different things and be multiple and all that. So I think it's that kind of game. It's a chance to try to clean a lot of this stuff in real time. There's going to be tons of mistakes. We know that. And then see what kind of jump they can make into that Cal game.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistakes are going to be missed tackles. I'm with you on that. That's going to happen. It just is. Football's not like it used to be, guys. Like they don't get to tackle all the time at practice. So they're getting out there and really tackling in an intense situation for the first time. I mean, the scrimmages are like that, yes, but this is, it's totally different in a game setting. So that's going to happen. Expect that. Those injuries are interesting because don't you think we would probably know if they were serious injuries, something that would keep these guys out for a long time?
I would think so. I mean, most of those guys, Marcus Harris is the only one I'm not sure about because he got, from what I understand, he got hurt in the last scrimmage, and then that was it. We haven't seen anything from that. The other guys we would see in the yellow jersey, but they still looked somewhat active. They still looked in pretty good spirits. They were, it was more like limiting their reps than them just standing over there doing nothing. It didn't seem to be, even Coy Moore, those guys, they're doing stuff. They're just not participating in every little thing. So, yeah, I think it's probably more cautionary to some degree.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of those guys, you said Jalen McLeod, Austin Keys, Keldrick Falk, these are all new guys to Auburn, at least. So if they're holding them out, let's just say it is precautionary and it's something that they're like, well, let's make sure they're healthy by the time we get the season. My question is, do you do that if these guys are not proven to be good players for you? Because if they're still trying to prove that they can play or be starters or be in the rotation, you probably want to see more practice from them, even if they are banged up a little bit. That's just my thought on it. I don't know if that's exactly how they would do it. That's something that I thought about with them. So that would tell me that I think those three, Austin Keys, Jalen McLeod, even Keldrick Falk, who's a freshman, are probably starters or very, very key rotational players. I mean, that's a good way to know, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think their importance and their value to the team is evidenced by keeping them out based on probably some minor things.
Right.
I think that's a fair way to look at it. Yeah, I think that's a very fair way to look at it. This real quick, this game is on ESPN, by the way, 2:30. Isn't that weird? Auburn UMass is going to be the nationally televised ESPN game. Great for Auburn, great for Hugh Freeze. I guess ESPN saw some value in putting Hugh Freeze out there nationally televised 2:30 as the ESPN game. So they'll get some nice recognition, some eyeballs on that game for sure.
I think that further proves that Auburn is one of those brands. Nowadays it's all about the NIL and the brand. If you're not one of those brands, you're going to struggle in recruiting and all that. So that just proves, hey, ESPN's willing to put this game in a pretty primetime slot there, 2:30 on the first major college football Saturday. So I think that speaks well to Auburn's branding, right?
There's no doubt. Real quick, gametime.co. I want to give them a shout out. They're a sponsor of ours on the show, gametime.co. Visit them for tickets to sporting events, comedy shows, concerts, all that good stuff. Gametime.co. Go check them out. Use the code War Eagle to get 20% off your first purchase for tickets. Again, War Eagle, one word, 20% off. And they have a deal where if you buy your tickets, then find tickets somewhere else in the same section, same row, you can get they'll give you like 110% of the difference back. So that's a pretty cool deal that they do to sort of help guarantee that they've got the lowest tickets. Gametime.co. Make sure and go check them out. All right, Cole. So I wrote about as I'm gonna do all year. On Sundays I write my 3-2-1 after games, which will be 3 things learned, 2 questions, 1 prediction after each game. I wrote that kind of a preseason version heading into this one, and wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of things, mainly on the 2 questions part. So here's what I wrote about. One was, what is the right combination of record and recruiting for Auburn fans to feel like this was a good fall? Because I think there's some kind of, it's like a sliding scale. I think there's somewhere, if they go 6-6, but they finish X in recruiting, I think they'll be happy. If they go 7-5, but they finish X in recruiting, they'll be happy. I think there's kind of it sort of depends. And then even, of course, it gets into the wins and losses and how those games go. But I wrote that I feel like it's going to be a moving target until probably December in terms of how supporters of Auburn football feel about the season. They're going to get through the season. They're going to have to see recruiting, transfer portal. Do you agree with that? I mean, don't you think it's just at least in year one? Now, past year one, you can't play this game. Past year one, you're moving into your second full class, but third recruiting class, second season. You can't play the game of, well, we'll be okay with this on the field if recruiting's going well. Because at that point, after year one, it's about winning. It's about wins. It's about winning. Year one's kind of, to me, at Auburn is the only season, if that you can get away with whatever the record's going to be on the field and get somewhat of a pass. Past that, it's not going to happen. What do you sort of think about that? Do you think it's going to be kind of a moving target for fans well past the season in terms of trying to figure out, was this fall as a collective a good fall or a bad fall? Like, how do you think Auburn supporters are going to view sort of the next 4 or 5 months?
Well, I think number one, the recruiting has been better than it has in, recent history, I guess it's fair to say, already. And they haven't even showed their product on the field yet. So they're in the top 15 right now, and, still a possibility to sign that top 10 class. We all think that's a possibility. So I think you've bought yourself some time and some grace maybe from Auburn fans with that. I think that might be the best word, some grace. Because now, at the same time, I think Auburn fans are very, they're going to suffer from PTSD. They just are, because there's been some bad times at Auburn, obviously. And there's been some bad times with all the previous coaches at Auburn. So if Auburn goes in there this season and they drop a game that it just seems like they're supposed to win, a lot of Auburn fans are going to go, man, that's just like the Gus Malzahn era. Even though it's first year, I mean, the grace period is much smaller these days. Okay, it just is, especially from fans. Fans are not reasonable most of the time. So that you don't want that. Okay, I think taking care of business in the games you're supposed to, which we've gone down that schedule several times, and there's 5 or 6 games you're probably supposed to take care of business in. Then there's some toss-up games, and then there's some that are going to be hard to win. Obviously, the ones that are hard to win: LSU, Georgia, Alabama. Toss-ups, maybe Texas A&M is in the hard to win category, somewhere between that and toss-up, I'd say. Ole Miss could be a toss-up. Arkansas, Mississippi State. You should win Vandy, right? So win a couple of those toss-up games. I'd say you don't need to go below 6, and I'm basing that off of the schedule. You go below 6 wins, and I think even a top 10 class, I think there's still going to be some concern out there from Auburn fans with year one.
I think that's fair, because as you're talking through it, there's 5 games that they're the legitimate underdog, no question.
Yes.
Georgia, Bama, LSU, A&M on the road, Arkansas on the road. They're the underdog. Arkansas, I mean, those programs are a little bit further along talent-wise. Like, they are the underdog in those 5.
Right.
So if you lost those 5, and then you've got your other 7, going 6-6 would mean you drop. And heck, we'll see what kind of season Ole Miss puts. I mean, it's possible. I doubt it, but Ole Miss could come into Auburn as a 1-2 point favorite, like that.
Sure.
A 3-point favorite. I don't. I mean, that's going to be close, I would think, just because it'll be in Auburn. But
yeah,
Auburn could be the underdog in that one too. But given those other 5, if they're the underdog, going 6-6 means they drop one more game of that other group of games that are either they're the favorite or is it kind of a toss-up game. And if you looked at the season and said, all right, you lost every game you should have lost, you won every game you should have won or you could have won except one. That's, if you look at it that way, you'd be like, well, that's for year one. That I think that they would let that slide, if you will. I don't think they're okay with it, but I think they would let it slide. I think they'd love to go upset somebody, go upset A&M or Arkansas, or maybe, who knows, maybe LSU on the road or something crazy. You get 2 weeks off before LSU, and so that'll be an interesting one. Yeah, but when you look at it like that, it's 6-6 or would be basically doing what you're supposed to do. To the most part, 7-5. If they're the favorite against Ole Miss and Mississippi State at home, then 7-5 is doing exactly what you were supposed to do. Win the ones you're supposed to win, lose the ones you're supposed to lose. Do no different either way.
Yeah, 6-6 or 7-5 would technically be meeting expectations. I think below those wins is under expectations, and then if you go higher, you're overachieving expectations. And by the way, if you'll think back to Gus Malzahn 2013, he absolutely overachieved. I say overachieved. That's probably not the best way to put it. They weren't supposed to be that good in 2013. Coming off
no. Overachieved. I mean, they blew that out of the water. There's not even a word for what they did from 12 to 13. I mean, it was literally one of the largest turnarounds in the history of college football. I mean, What he did in 13 was unbelievable.
The unfortunate thing for him is that it set this bar so high, and then he could never reach it again. Right?
No, not even close.
Not close. So you find yourself in a weird place there. Yeah, you never want to take away that season from him, but man, it really disrupted him, as he went on as Auburn's head football coach. So you almost think, well, look, you can tell that there's the building for the future is there 100%. You're in the top 15 right now. You haven't even played a game yet as the head coach at Auburn. You haven't shown anything about what your team's going to look like. You flipped a guy from Bama. You flipped a guy from Georgia. You got these recruiting wins. You took a quarterback that Dabo Swinney wanted. That hadn't happened in a long time. A lot of those things, you got some of these wins that have just notched you up a little bit to where, again, you have some grace from the Auburn fans going, okay, I know the future looks pretty good right now. The only thing is, I say it's really, this is the way you have to put it. You put some resources and money into the NIL and in the transfer portal, to go ahead and win now. So that it's kind of like Texas A&M. Okay, Texas A&M, as Desmond Howard thinks they're going to be so good, right? It's because the recruiting has been top notch. But when your recruiting's top notch, that's an expectation, and you have to meet it on the field. And if you don't, you're in trouble. Well, now, with a really good portal class, a new quarterback, all these new players to go along with some good players you had before, but you had to have more, obviously. The expectations, I think, for the season are a little bit higher than they were going to be. So you do find yourself in sort of a strange place if you're Hugh Freeze, because now there's a little bit more pressure to be good this year because of what you brought in to help this year immediately.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting if Auburn fans have to sort of temper their expectations to match the outside world a little bit. And you mentioned recruiting flips. I mean, think about, even go back to the very, very end of the last class. You flipped Kay and Lee from Ohio State. So, like, you could go back to the last 15, 16, 17 commits, whatever. And of that group, you could say you flipped a kid from Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, and then you beat Clemson another one. Like,
Florida
that's what I wrote about that thing about
recruiting.
Huh?
Keldrick Falk, Florida State, Connor Lew, Miami. Flip those two guys as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, that's in the last handful. So you start, and that's, that's when we talk about recruiting, by the way. Like, look, Brian Harsin, that first class or whatever, they were ranked top 20 in one of those classes. I mean, and so I
Yep.
could see how you go, well, hold on. Harsin had a class that was 18th and Freeze is sitting here at 14. What's the difference? Well, if you dive in a little bit to the numbers, the numbers you'll see a 4-star outside of the top 300 is different than a 4-star that's ranked 150.
Yeah.
Also, look at the caliber of schools they're beating. I mean, Auburn rarely, in Brian Harsin's tenure, rarely did they beat any elite program for a player. Even some of the 4-stars they landed, they weren't beating Bama, Georgia. They weren't doing any of that. I mean, maybe a couple, but Hugh Freeze right away is not just beating them. Even some of the kids they've lost out on, just start to look where Auburn's being mentioned and think about where Harsin was in those 2 years. Look now at these elite prospects, and you're like, they're considering Florida State, Georgia, A&M, and there's Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Auburn's popping back up in these lists and being seriously considered by these elite prospects, and they weren't on these lists a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. They weren't there. And so Auburn's getting back into the mix and being respected by these kids, even if they don't end up choosing Auburn. Go read what kids are saying. Go to auburnlive.com and read what the kids look at the caliber of kid that the caliber of prospect that Auburn's even getting on campus, and then look at the quotes that they have when leaving. If you pay attention to it, you see a difference. It's not just about a recruiting ranking; it's about all this foundational stuff that's happening behind that will end up turning out better classes, more productive classes, more quality kids, more quality prospects. I mean, go back to that. I can't remember. I guess we're at the 21 class, whatever the class is. There's almost nothing left of one of those classes from Harsin. Now I can't remember. I think it was the 21. Was it the 21 class that like basically everybody's gone now?
It is. Yeah. Jarquez Hunter's the only one left now. Half of that class. I mean, look, he came. I don't blame him too much for that one because he came in midway through that class, or more than midway through that class. Gus was the coach for most of that. He comes in, he brings in, I think it was Caden Bridges, Joko Willis, and Jarquez Hunter, a couple more, but Colby Smith. So, give him credit for Jarquez. He wasn't really on the board until Harsin got there. That was a good one, obviously. But, that whole class is just, that class put Auburn behind big time.
I mean, an entire class. I'm sitting here looking through. I mean, an entire class. Of course, Demetrius Robertson played. He transferred, and he played a little bit that 1 year. He helped.
Yeah.
Donovan Kaufman is in that class too. He's been
Marcus
nice.
Harris.
Yeah, Finley played, but I mean, listen to the names in this class. This 20 class: Jawan Gaston, Colby Smith, Roteris Torrance, Caden Bridges, A.D. Diamond, Joko Willis, Kamal Hayden, Ian Matthews, Garner Langlow, Landon King, Tabichi Akoli, Marquise Robinson, Tavares Dawson, Hal Presley. People wouldn't even know that kid existed. Amari Harvey, Demetrius Davis, Lee Hunter, and Dylan Brooks. I mean, basically, not just every kid, now they're gone. Dang near every kid I just mentioned didn't even sniff the field. Like, they didn't even come close to being a contributor. They weren't even in the ballpark of being a contributor.
The other problem is not many of those names are making huge waves elsewhere. Kamal Haddon, I give him credit. I think he's a starter at Tennessee at corner. So, yes, he's pretty good. I think Hal Presley had a really good season for Baylor a year ago. Obviously, D. Davis starting quarterback at Alabama State. But, even from a production standpoint, that class is not really living up to expectation.
It will be interesting, by the way, to see, maybe after this year, next year, as bad as we know Harsin's recruiting was in terms of planning, effort, importance, like understanding exactly how important it was, right? There was a lacking from Harsin in terms of you have to live and breathe it. There were some players that I'm interested to see. If you look back, like that next class, that 22 class, and you think about like if some of these guys pan out, whether it's, you got J.D. Rim, you got Keontae Scott, you got Robert Woodyard, Holden Gerner, you've got Austin Osbury, Amari Kelly doing some good things. You got Damari Alston, you got Camden Brown,
Yep.
You got Michael Riley Ducker, Jay Fair.
Yep.
You've got Alex McPherson. You've got and then you start getting into some transfers. Like, so there's still some guys there that you could look back and say, hey, there's some impact guys that they got out of that class. Then you look at the transfers, Jason Jones, DJ James.
Huge.
And so, but still, like I mean, of the players I mentioned, that's still, of 30 players, that's still not enough. I can't name, you can't have a class of high school and transfers of 30 guys and then look back in 2 years and only be able to name like 10.
Yeah.
And go, well, they landed on, you can't land on a third. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think, and that's every player I named. I mean, some of those guys haven't even done anything yet. It's just potential, but I think you got to, it'll be interesting to look back and see if some of those kids, some of those prospects develop. All right. Here's the other thing I was going to talk about was what's kind of your prediction on the season. I think it's a perfect time. Season's about to start. What do you think? Doesn't have to be a win-loss unless you feel like you want to predict a win-loss record for the squad. I would probably go, if I was going win-losses, oh boy, I would go 7-5. I think there's enough talent to get the job done. I don't know how that pans out. One of them's got to be Arkansas and A&M. You got to win one of those. You win your 4 non-conference games. That puts you at 5, and then you win the Mississippis and you're at 7. So that's why the Arkansas and A&M games I just think are pivotal games. Yeah. Of course, you beat Vanderbilt too. Those 2 games are just such swing games. They're games that I think Auburn can go compete in. But I think 7-5 would be my prediction for the season. The other thing I wrote about, as you sort of think about what you want to say, the other thing I wrote is I think this team will be better as the season goes on. I think it'll look different as the season goes on. I think the team you see in late October, November will be a better version, and it should be, but I think it'll be a lot better version than what you see in September. I think the quality of play from this Auburn team, first 6, last 6, will get a lot better for a lot of reasons. Chemistry, guys understanding what to do on both sides of the football, coaches have a better understanding of exactly what the talent is and how to best utilize it. And then I think those first 3 games in conference play are brutal. You could be 0-3, but you could also turn around and win your next 3 and right the ship against the Mississippis and then Vanderbilt. So I think it's going to be a season that just hang in there is what I'm saying. I think get through September, October, hang in there, and I think this team could get better as the season goes on. But what do you sort of think about this team win-loss record, or what's at least one thing you think you could hang your hat on right now as a prediction or a projection for how the season will go?
Well, the schedule is both favorable and non-favorable, depending on how you look at it. So the first stretch, the first SEC stretch, the Texas A&M, the LSU, the Georgia games, and I think you get a bye week or something in between there, right? But those are big. I mean, there's a
LSU, you get a bye after Georgia. Between Georgia and LSU, there's a bye.
Okay,
that's your bye. Yeah.
But there's potential to lose all 3 of those games.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's
likely. It's likely. I mean, they're going to be the underdog in all of them.
Yeah. So I mean, very likely that it is likely that they could lose those 3 games in a row. That's really tough for morale when you're brand new like this. So that I don't like. I don't like that stretch at all for Auburn. But then I think it becomes very favorable after that. And just like I agree with you, I think that this team will get a lot stronger as the season goes on. I think it'll get stronger from those losses. Let's just say that those are going to be losses right now. Okay. In my head, this is how I'm thinking of it. I think they will get stronger from those losses. I think they could even make some of those games. Well, I definitely think Texas A&M is going to be close. I think LSU could be closer than maybe the line will say. Georgia, I'm a little more worried about that one. But you do get them at home, so who knows? Maybe a couple quarters, it's close. Either way, I think you're going to – morale might not be at an all-time high, but I think your team will get better. I think your players will get better. I think that all these new faces won't be new anymore, and they'll be, starting to show out a little bit. The whole reason you brought them here, right? Because I think you do have some really good players on the team, some that came back and some that you brought in. So when that starts coming together, I really like that back half of the schedule for Auburn. I think they could go on a run, and I think they could potentially beat Arkansas, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt. I think they could win those 3 SEC games. And to me, I give the nod to being favorable because you want to go out on that high note, I think. Right? Now you got Alabama, that's going to be tough, obviously. But it's a high note by winning a lot of those games, and I think they can. So I'm teetering somewhere between 7-5 and 8-4 right now. I'm going to go with 7-5. That's what my gut says to go with right now. But you get on a little run there, and you might catch some momentum, catch fire at that back half of the schedule.
Yeah, I agree. That Arkansas game could end up being a big one,
It's gonna be,
for
it's
trying
gonna
to
be
get
big.
over the hump. But I think that team that plays Alabama is going to be a far different team, a far better team
Definitely.
than the one that goes to College Station.
Peyton Thorne should be very comfortable by that time,
Yeah,
assuming
yeah.
he's healthy and
Now,
all that.
the only caveat I would say in what we're talking about, which is a team that's improving, a team that's better, the only thing that would negate that is injuries and depth. The depth is still not there at a lot of positions.
Definitely.
So they can't afford injuries, which can happen as the season goes on. That's probably the only thing that this team could really hinder the success is if they have an injury at defensive tackle or linebacker. Those are probably the two positions immediately I go to because I don't like the depth there.
True.
There's not a lot of room for error there. Offensive line, there seems to be a little bit more room for error. Maybe depends on the player, but I think there's a better combination of quality guys there. Obviously, an injury to Peyton Thorne completely shifts what you do on offense if you had to go to Robbie or Holden. But I think that defensive side where you get a little beat up, you get a little fatigue, get a little worn down, want to see how the depth holds up, which is why these first 3 games, it's going to be so important to play a ton of guys on defense, specifically that defensive line. These first 3 games, they need to rotate everybody. I mean, I know you got to get Keldrick. I'm not saying don't get Keldrick Falk snaps. Obviously, get those guys reps. But man, I'm as much as I can, I'm rotating in everybody I possibly can, even if I'm doing it too much, even if
Right.
I'm rotating a little bit too much against UMass, Cal, and Sanford. I've got to create a rotation there, and I've got to keep that defensive front as fresh as possible. And having 3 games in September, non-conference games to do that would be nice to see. Lawrence Johnson getting a bunch of snaps, or Gary Walker, like just a bunch of guys just getting in there and try to keep these guys fresh and limit stuff heading into SEC play.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. And I guess the good and bad thing about injuries is that everybody's going to be in the same boat. So do you wonder, does Arkansas, does Mississippi State, Ole Miss, I mean, do they really have that much better depth than Auburn? That could come into play too. Everybody's going to be in the injury boat. There's going to be injuries. That's part of it. I'm not in the business of saying, hey, that they could have won this game if there weren't injuries. Well, that's part of the game. So expect that. But I think Auburn's depth is good enough to hold up against the back half of the schedule is what I'm saying. Now, if you had LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M on the back half and you're having trouble with injuries, they're going to have better depth than you, those 3 teams.
Yeah.
So that's why I like the way the schedule lays out.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be an exciting season. It's going to be a fun season, a lot of intrigue, a lot of interest. I think there's going to be some awesome moments. I mean, I don't know where they're going to come, but I think the new staff, some of the new talent they brought in, the hunger from this staff and the players, I think there's going to be some surprises. I don't know when and where they're going to come,
Sure.
but I think there's going to be some moments that we remember from this first season that are going to be exciting. I think back to Gene Chiswick's first season in 2009, and you have that moment where you go to Knoxville, and Tennessee wasn't awesome, but you go up there and you beat them and you run the ball, and that was a really big win at the time for that team. And so I think this team could have some of those moments. Maybe the A&M game or the Arkansas game is that road game where they go on the road and pull off a big win in year 1. But it'll be interesting to follow. Again, Auburn and UMass 2:30 on Saturday. Auburn's a 38-point favorite. It's going to be hot, but it won't be anything like it was this weekend. It'll be 10 degrees cooler, so it'll feel hot, but it won't feel as hot as it did.
Yeah.
This Saturday. I think you're right about the atmosphere. It'll be great for at least a half. Then people might be like, all right, it's a little warm. I'm out of here. But
It's going to be hot for UMass. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, that's going to be brutal. And how about that? They opened the season going from UMass to Mexico. They played at New Mexico State, right?
I think so.
Yeah, back to UMass, down to Auburn. And that's what you got to do when you're that kind of program, I guess. All right, make sure to go check out auburnlive.com. Also, the modcast will be starting back. For those that have listened to all our shows in the past, the modcast features everybody. Cole, Jeffrey, myself, Zach will be there, and we'll do that. That's posted on Fridays, so during the season. So be on the lookout for the modcast to come back as we just kind of preview the game, talk about things we're thinking about heading in, all that good stuff. So make sure and check that out as well. Again, shout out to our sponsor, Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn, Magnolia Avenue next to Taco Mama. Go check them out. Happy hours 4 to 6. Great drinks, great old fashions, great places to sit, good vibe, good culture, all that good stuff. Not a stand-up bar like you would a college bar. You can kind of go have a seat, take a load off, and go check them out. Session Bar downtown Auburn. All right, let's get out of here, Cole. We'll come back on the modcast here in a few days and talk specifics about what we're going to look for in this game on Saturday, what we expect. Until then, everybody go check out auburnlive.com. Subscribe if you haven't. It's $1 for the first month. That's their new preview or whatever. If you're a new member and you want to go check it out, you get a whole month for $1. That's the new trial. That's what I was looking for. Trial.
Yeah.
Go check that out and make sure and listen to all the recruiting podcasts from Cole and Jeffrey and all the guys, the call-in show and all that good stuff. All right, let's roll.
Let's do it.
All right, see ya.